Well, good evening and welcome to this forum for the Senate District 7 State Senator. And we are grateful for this opportunity to be here tonight with three candidates. This forum is being put on by the Hibbing Area Chamber of Commerce. And we're so thankful for Hibbing Public Access Television. They are the ones who are recording and broadcasting this event. I'm Pastor Dan Erickson, and my colleague, Mr. Steve Potts from the Hibbing Community College, will be asking the questions this evening. The person who arranged this forum is the president of the Hibbing Area Chamber, that's Shelley Hansen, and she is also our timekeeper tonight. So we're grateful that all three of you have joined us this evening, and we're going to start with your opening statements. You each have 2 minutes to just introduce yourselves to the voters. Start with Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben DiNucci. I'm a fifth generation Iron Ranger. My family's lived in Nashwauk for 115 years. My grandfathers both worked at National Steel, as did my father before he became a teacher. Both my parents are retired educators. I'm a volunteer firefighter, a former mayor, current county commissioner, and a small business owner. I own 2 small mom and pop union shop grocery stores. And those stores were going to close, but I know how important businesses like these are to our communities. So I put together a team that kept the doors open, kept the lights on, and we have 30 people working between the 2 stores and good paying union jobs. I don't just talk about keeping communities thriving. I know what it takes. Taking action, I've done my part as a local business owner. I know the challenges our businesses face and the resources they require. I worked in local government for the last 8 years as the mayor of my hometown, and currently as an Itasca County Commissioner. I fought for good paying local jobs like those in the mining industry and worked to pass a referendum that replaced the oldest school in the state. And for a 4th year in a row, I got a 0% levy increase passed in Itasca County. Running for state senate is a natural extension of work I've already been doing. Times are tough. I talk to people every day who are struggling to put food on the table or fill their gas tanks. And it doesn't help when corporations who our workers make rich don't come to the negotiating table. I'm gonna fight for land swap deals to keep our minds open, eliminate Social Security taxes for our seniors, and raise the taconite homestead credit. We're losing a lot of institutional knowledge with the passing of David Tomasoni. Now, more than ever, we need an experienced leader that can be a strong, independent voice for us in St. Paul. We can't take a chance on a risky, extreme candidate. I have the experience to hit the ground running on day 1 as your state senator.
Thank you, Ben. Kim, your opening statement.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Hibbing Public Access Television, the moderators, and the Hibbing Chamber of Commerce for inviting me here tonight and for having this forum. I am a wife of 36 years, so that should demonstrate right there I know how to work across party lines. That means something. I am a proud mother. I'm a graduate of Hibbing Community College and the University of Minnesota Duluth. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and I'm a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner. I am a 24+ year public servant. I have been an internal auditor, a business manager, and I have significant investigatory experience. I am a 6+ year member of the Hibbing School Board, where I serve as the treasurer. I have for the last 5 years. I am a former fire civil service commissioner here in Hibbing. I'm a former 18 years dues-paying union member. I am a 6-year member of the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools, and I am a founding member of the advisory board of the Boys and Girls Club of Hibbing. And I am running as a write-in candidate to represent each and every one of you in our state senate. Your voice was heard, and you're worth fighting for. We must continue to work together. And I am doing this because all of us have seen increasingly over the last several years how our 2 major parties are failing us. They're failing us at all levels of government, including on the Iron Range. In the last 4 months, I saw firsthand on numerous occasions that the parties are putting politics and parties above people. My integrity and in good faith, I could not sit back and let these parties continue to fail us. And actions speak louder than words. So unfortunately, in this race, we have 2 candidates who represent parties who we simply cannot trust will put the people of the Iron Range and the Northland above the party, and that's why I'm still running.
Thank you, Kim. Rob?
Okay, thank you, Pastor Dan. Thank you to the Hibbing Chamber and Mr. Potts, and also thank you to Hibbing Public Television for filming this and putting this on. I am Rob Farnsworth, and I grew up over in Chisholm. After high school, I attended Hibbing Community College for a little over a year, where I took just about every class that Mr. Potts has to offer. Transferred to the University of St. Thomas, where I earned a double major in history and social studies. Later on, I earned my master's degree in special education from Mankato. I've been a teacher for a little over 20 years. Starting actually with the suburban Twin Cities School District of Mounds View, before I realized that I didn't really want to be in the cities, moved back home, started working for the Minnesota Department of Corrections up at Thistledew, also worked at the facility down in Red Wing. And then for the last 13 years, I've been a special education teacher in the Hibbing School District. I'm also a licensed real estate agent in Hibbing, where I live with my wife Jamie and our 4 children, Hannah, Isaac, Abigail, who's sitting out there today, wanted to come and watch Dad, and Samuel, and also we have a Labrador Ginger. When we first got married, my wife and I were living down in Red Wing, and when we decided it was time to start a family, we knew that we wanted to raise our kids in the same area that we grew up. So I transferred back up to Thistledew. Jamie got a nursing job up here, and we packed up and headed home. That was a little over 15 years ago. Now we're raising our children right here on the Iron Range where we grew up. And that's the reason I've been so active in politics and why I'm running for state senate now, to make sure the Northland is the best place to live, work, and raise a family. Some of the things that I plan on working on, first and obviously, I'm gonna support mining. My dad was a 33-year union miner. I understand how important those jobs are. I also wanna work to reduce the cost of living in our state with permanent tax cuts, starting with the tax on our senior citizens' Social Security benefits. And of course, it's probably no surprise, as a teacher, I am passionate about reforming our education system so that our kids get an education that they can actually use after high school. We're gonna talk about a lot of other issues tonight, so I look forward to earning your vote as our next state senator.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, Kim, you're going to handle the first question first. The last several years, it seems there's been an erosion of public confidence in the state legislature. What will you do to restore the public's trust in our legislature?
So I think it all starts with honesty, integrity, and doing what you say you're going to do. I think it's important to be consistent and stand up for what's right, stand up for the people of the Northland, no matter how difficult it might come. One of the things that makes that very easy for me is I am unaffiliated with either party. I have not taken public funding from the metro political parties and their representatives as some of the other candidates have. And so each time that I vote, my vote will be with the people of northeastern Minnesota. And I have no problem working in an environment where there are different viewpoints. I do that every day. I have the skills, I have the experience of reaching common ground and coming up with a solution that we can all live with. And I think that is extremely important. And so just being honest and transparent, I think will go a long way.
Thank you, Kim. Rob, in the last several years, there seems to be an erosion of public confidence in the state legislature. What will you do to seek to restore the public's trust?
I think the most important thing that we can do and need to do to regain public trust is to figure out how to work across the aisle. Instead of all this gridlock and all of this fighting, and to do that, I think we need to be willing to listen to the other side. And so I was out door knocking today in Hibbing, freezing cold out today. And so I knock on a number of doors, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and a couple of, knocked on a couple of doors today where Democrats answered the door. They're like, nope, not interested in your flyer, I'm a Democrat. And rather than just walking away and saying, well, okay, whatever, I almost always ask, unless they're like super mean or swearing or threatening me, I almost always ask the question, well, even if you're not gonna vote for me, what are you concerned about? And I stand there and listen. And I remember I was door knocking over in Aurora. It must have been in July. And I was talking to a lady. She said, I'm not going to vote for you. But then she was telling me about her trouble getting disability benefits. And so we probably chatted for 30 minutes. And my campaign manager would probably say, Rob, you got to cut loose and get to the other doors. But I really want to hear what people have to say. And I think that's important. Down at the legislature, I'm not going to agree with a lot of people, but at least I want to, listen, hear where they're coming from, and work across the aisle.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Ben, same question for you. In recent years, there seems to be an erosion in public confidence in the state legislature. What will you do to restore the public's trust?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm running to represent the people of this region. I'm not running to caucus with one party or another. Certainly, I'm going to work with the party that's endorsed me, but the DFL is a big tent, and we don't always agree on everything. For example, I'm a pro-mining candidate. I come from a mining family. Mining is the engine that drives our natural resource economy here. I'm able to tell our story to members of the DFL, but I'm also able to reach across the aisle and work with Republicans that support mining or energy matters or issues that we need to find compromise on to move ourselves forward. I've learned a lot of lessons from the late David Tomasoni. He was the master at gaining moving beyond partisanship to get things done. I think that was a great lesson that I learned in my time working with him, and I intend to conduct myself in the same manner.
Thank you, Ben. Kim, you have 30 seconds for any response or additional comments.
Right, and I think it's important to work across party aisles, and I think we can't forget there were two respected senators that left their party because working in a party and with a party, they realized that that was not getting the job done. I think more people are somewhere between the two extremes, and that's where I am, and that's what I want to do, and how I'm going to work together with both sides in order to continue to get the job done.
Thank you, Kim. Rob, 30 seconds.
Well, I just, when Ben mentioned Senator Tomasoni, I thought of a story from about probably eight years ago. So my wife and I purchased a house next door to the home that Senator Tomasoni's parents had. And so as he was preparing to sell that house, I got to know him, over those years. And I remember coming home one day with a friend of mine, and he was over there, and he's like, hey, come over here. Can you guys help me move some furniture out of the basement? And so me and my friend went down in the basement, and we moved the furniture out. And then he's like, oh, hey, if you want any of these tools, take any of these tools. And the promise that I make people is that if I have to help people move furniture out of their basement to work across the aisle, that's what I'll do.
Okay, thank you. And Ben, 30 seconds.
For the last 8 years, I've worked in local government in a nonpartisan seat, and I've learned the ability to work with everyone. You've got to be able to build coalitions to get things done, be it Democrats or Republicans, and I've been able to do just that. I've been able to be effective in local government through that experience, and I bring that experience to this campaign and election.
Okay, thank you. Rob, the second question, you get to start. What should the legislature do with the state's estimated $9.25 billion surplus? Would you support how much of that would you support using for tax relief?
Well, and now, Pastor Dan, the estimates for the surplus, it's looking like it's going to go north of 12 billion when the November forecast comes out. It could be as high as 15 billion. And so to me, that is proof that we are overtaxed in Minnesota. So absolutely, I support cutting taxes. And I don't support these one-time gimmicks like the so-called Walls bucks, but I support permanent tax relief so that middle-class, working-class people have more money in their paycheck at the end of every month. I support eliminating the tax on Social Security. Republicans have been trying to get this done since at least 2015, multiple times. The DFL, which there's no tax that they don't like, has stopped stopped the attempt to get rid of the tax on Social Security, and it's the right thing to do. We need to make sure we get it done. As far as what we would spend, our kids, our schools have been really harmed during the pandemic with the shutdowns. And, we need interventionists, we need more mental health. And so I would say that we should spend some of that surplus for our schools because there's been a lot of damage done by the lockdowns. We've got to get our kids back to where they need to be.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Ben, same question for you. With the large state surplus, whatever the number is, do you support using some of that or how much of that for tax relief?
Yeah, the surplus is a tremendous opportunity to provide tax relief to working men and women and not the super wealthy and big corporations. I want to see the tax on Social Security eliminated to help our senior citizens out. There's bipartisan support for that measure, and there's no reason why we can't get that done. Dedicating surplus funds to our schools, law enforcement, EMS will also help us alleviate tax burdens. And when it comes to property tax, increasing local government aid and county program aid is very important. As a first responder and a former mayor, I've put together a city budget. I've worked in those departments, and it's difficult to find revenues. The surplus provides a means for such revenues to give local government aid to our cities like Virginia, which I believe has an $8 million need for local government aid. We can certainly increase that level. Another area I think we have an opportunity is in increasing the taconite homestead credit. That'll reduce people's property taxes by $300. At the end of the day, the surplus is our ability to put $1 billion towards schools, use state funds to leverage, use matching state funds to leverage federal funds, and also put money towards wages that are needed for our workers.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Kim, same question for you. With a large state surplus, would you support using that money for tax relief, and how much of that for tax relief?
Certainly. I think first off, as a legislator, we need to sit back and we need to evaluate and understand the source of that surplus. These past couple of years, there's been a lot of anomalies, and we have to understand how much of that is actually permanent and being generated as a result of taxation or other revenue streams, or how much of it is an anomaly and simply flowing through from the federal government due to the stimulus funding. So I have the skills and the background to be able to sort through that and understand that. And then from there, I believe we have to look at how much we should refund in the way of one-time refunds versus income tax adjustments and modifications. And I completely support eliminating the tax on Social Security. Beyond that, I think we need to look at how much we need to reasonably invest in programs in schools, in LGA, looking at the formulas to make sure that we're meeting our needs and yet providing enough back to the local school districts and cities. And then from there, we can look at what we need to responsibly retain and hold back in government versus invest in our community. So I think it's just understanding, first of all, what the sources of the funding is and the surplus is.
Thank you, Kim. Rob, you have 30 more seconds.
Yeah, so I agree with Kim that a certain percentage of that 9.25 billion is an anomaly, and that's why I would say, that's specifically, sort of earmarked for things like, dealing with our education issues. But month after month, ever since we stopped getting all of the federal pandemic funding, month after month, and I don't have it in my notes, I wish I'd written it down, but we're bringing in about 120 million to 200 million every month more than is expected. So we're bringing in way more every month than is expected. We're overtaxed. Yes, some of it's an anomaly, but we're also overtaxed.
30 seconds, Ben.
I think the budget targets that were established during this session, those targets were a good plan to move forward. We need legislators down at the state capitol that want to get that work done. When I'm out at the doors talking to people, I ask them, what do you think we should do with the surplus? Would you like some of that money back? And they say, of course. But what they really want and what we really talk about is the $9 billion worth of issues we have in the state and how that money should go towards solving some of those challenges.
Okay, Kim, 30 seconds.
I have no other comment.
Okay, thank you. Ben, you are the first one on this. All of you have talked about working across the aisle, but the winner of this election may indeed be the one who determines which party is in the majority in the Senate. What impact would a DFL or a GOP majority have on our district?
A DFL majority in the Senate would allow for, as we were talking about the last topic, surplus monies to be spent and problems to be solved. I think what we saw in the last session was The GOP majority in the Senate left everything on the table. I want to leave everything on the field. The DFL has an agenda that will invest in our education, invest in transportation, pay wages so that people can make a good paying wage at their jobs. The ability for the DFL to be in the majority will certainly change the amount of progress and work we get done in northern Minnesota. It'll allow for us to move this area forward, and it's really critical. One of the critical things that are at stake this year in the election.
Thank you. Kim, same question. If you are elected senator, you will, maybe the vote determines which party is in the majority. What impact would a DFL or a GOP majority have on our district?
Well, I prefer, I guess, to answer that in a way that I am running unaligned with either party. So my vote will be with the people of the Northland, and that's where I can choose to represent the majority view of the people in northeastern Minnesota. I can align, and I will stand up for women's rights. I will stand up for the separation of church and state, so all people's views are represented and respected, and all marginalized groups will be respected. I have been working as a local elected official in a school district over the last 6 years, probably the last 2 being some of the most difficult. So I understand that piece of it. I understand what it means to be fiscally responsible. I understand what it means to stand up for mining, and not just during an election season, and I will continue to do that. And so I will vote with the party that represents the views of the people of northeastern Minnesota.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Rob, same question to you. As if you're elected, you may be the deciding vote as who determines the majority in the Senate. What impact would a DFL or GOP majority have on our district?
Well, this is fairly simple. A DFL majority would mean that there will be no new mining projects in Minnesota. The DFL has supported Prove It First. You know, DFL senators like Ann Rest down in St. Louis Park can't stand mining, want to put a stop to mining, and it's not just going to stop with copper nickel. It'll stop, you know, it'll continue with taconite. I mean, look at the trouble that Mintac has had getting their permits. They've been waiting for 15 years for an air permit. So DFL control will mean no mining. It'll mean continuing to defund the police and not support our folks in law enforcement. It'll mean higher taxes, no tax relief. It'll mean that we're going to adopt things like the California car rules that aren't even adopted by the legislature. These are rulemaking by government agencies that the legislature hasn't been able to stop. And it'll mean that they're going to continue funding trains in the Twin Cities. And as your senator, I'm targeting the trains because we're spending billions of dollars on the trains while our roads and bridges are falling apart. And those trains require a subsidy year after year after year. Electing a GOP, electing a Republican Senate will mean you will have pro-mining legislators. We have had a number of Republicans that have proposed pro-mining bills in the last few years. It'll mean tax relief. It'll mean support for our law enforcement. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association because we do support law enforcement. It'll mean giving the legislature the authority over things like these California car rules that Tim Walz is trying to force on the people of Minnesota. And it'll mean appropriate funding for our roads and bridges here in Minnesota.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Ben, you have 30 seconds.
You know, I think what we saw this year at the legislature was the GOP chose politics over people, and that causes gridlock, and nobody wants to see that. It leads to very little getting done. We had $9 billion that we could have got, made a lot of progress. The other thing that's at stake here, I believe a DFL majority will protect a woman's right to choose her own reproductive health care decisions. And I think that's a very important aspect to this election.
Thank you, Ben. Kim, 30 seconds.
Yeah, related to this topic, I really think it's important, and I agree with Rob. It's important for mining in this area. I am extremely concerned that the candidate that's endorsed by the DFL party has already demonstrated back in 2018 that he spoke up against the entire Iron Range delegation when it came time to pull the Mesaba metallic leases. And he's aligning himself with Senator Rest, who clearly takes the position of opposing sulfide mining. We have mined up here responsibly and safely for decades, and we need to continue to do that.
Thank you, Kim. Rob, 30 seconds.
I agree with her.
Okay, thank you. And now it's time for me to yield to my colleague from the Hibbing Community College, Mr. Potts.
Thank you, Pastor Dan. And I should be completely transparent here. I work with Kim, and Ben and Rob are both former students, so I can honestly wish all three of you good luck on Tuesday, November 8th. Kim, let's start with you first on this one. Many metropolitan legislators oppose new mining projects in northern Minnesota. What would you say to them to persuade them to support further mining projects?
Right. So I think communication is so important. I not only visited PolyMet and Twin Metals and got a better understanding of that, I actually took the bold and courageous move of communicating with one of the lawyers who represents one of the groups that opposes the copper nickel mining. And I had such a splendid conversation with that individual, and when we ended, he looks forward to working with me again. And I asked the simple question with PolyMet. They've been at the table for almost 2 decades. And I said, have the two parties ever gotten together and actually talked? And I was appalled and pleasantly surprised to hear that the answer was no. And I think there's more common ground than there's not. But this goes back to trust and integrity and transparency. As much as it is what's happening, was the way the legislation was put together. And there were groups that felt as though their voices were not heard. So I completely support mining, and I hope I answered the question, but working together and communicating.
Thank you. Rob, same question. Many metropolitan legislators oppose new mining projects in northern Minnesota. What would you say to them to persuade them to support further mining projects? Well,
we have a saying up here in the North Country that I think perfectly would answer that, and it's watch your own bobber. I would love, and that's kind of half-hearted, but I'd love to tell them, hey, your water is 10 times dirtier than ours. We've been mining for 120 years, and we have the cleanest water in the state. That's not gonna work, right? So a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there. I think we need to bring them up there. We need to bring them up to tour PolyMet. When I toured PolyMet, I was surprised to learn that when they actually start mining, it's going to be cleaner than it is now because the tailings basin is actually leaching sulfides right now, and nobody's responsible for it. But when PolyMet takes over, they're gonna put the drain tile system around the whole system, so the water that's discharged will be cleaner than it is now. And I think they need to understand that. I think they need to learn about the Twin Metals project, that it's gonna be 400 to 5,000 feet underground. It's going to discharge zero water. It's gonna be at least 200 feet below the water table. And I think if we can actually get them up there to learn about this, that's gonna go a long way. And one of the things Representative Igo actually has been working on is a Zoom call, and he's been inviting as many representatives and senators and stakeholders as he can to get on these Zoom calls with these folks that are working on these mines so that they can learn about the mines and actually see what good it's gonna do. We need these minerals, for everything from cell phones to pacemakers to solar-powered cameras, I guess, or lights. So we need to get these materials here at home.
Thank you. Ben, many metropolitan legislators oppose new mining projects in northern Minnesota. What would you say to them to persuade them to support further mining projects?
Yeah, I've supported these new mining projects since my time as a mayor and my involvement in RAMS. I've attended the rallies. I have testified in support of the projects, wrote letters of resolution. I think we need to change the discussion around these projects to one of the ethical nature of where we get these minerals from. I like to say that we need to think globally, but mine locally. We all want cell phones and iPads, and the onset of electric cars produces a need for these minerals, and we have a decision to make. We can either continue to allow these minerals to come from third world countries where there are no child labor laws, there's no OSHA, MSHA, EPA, or we can mine these minerals right here where we have the best regulations in the world, and using the best workforce in the world. I think the nature of the discussion needs to change, and I think I'll be able to tell that story to those legislators that need to hear it.
Thank you. Kim, 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I think all of the above. I think, just like they take the legislatures up to northeastern Minnesota and across the state when it comes time to do bonding tours, I think we need to spend time doing that and getting them up into the Northland and into the proposed mining projects. Education, and I think it even has to start at a younger level. We have to get our students from the metro can't understand our way of life as our students can't understand theirs. So I think that's very important, and they'll be able to better understand. And when it comes time to set up regulations, I think getting people from both sides of the aisle to put together what those regulations might look like, things that we can all live with.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
I think we all pretty much agree on this, and my buttons on my jacket have been tinging on the table the whole time, so I'm going to use my 30 seconds to take my jacket off. So that I stop distracting my opponents over here. Thank you.
Ben, do you want extra time to take your jacket off?
I know
Okay.
my buttons aren't as loud, I guess.
I think mine.
You can use your 30 seconds as you wish, Ben.
Well, communication and education is key on this issue. We need to engage in the discussion and come to a place where we get to conditions where both sides are comfortable moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Let me read the question and then tell all three of you something at once. Rob, you get this one first. What do you see as the most divisive issues facing the legislature in the next session? Given the close division between parties, what would be the most effective approach to dealing with these issues? Now, we did not define divisive issues. That's, if you choose, you can define that however you wish.
I think we've been talking about mining, but I think mining, from a range perspective, is going to be the most divisive issue. We look at it as a matter of our livelihood. I grew up in the home of a 33-year union miner, and I know how much those jobs mean. And so when activists in the Twin Cities attack us, I feel that personally, and I think they have their own perspectives down there where they're genuinely concerned about the water, and I think they've been misinformed or lied to, and so again, the things that we just talked about on the last question, to bridge that divide on mining, I think we're going to have to do that. Going to have to educate them. Going to have to show them how important these good-paying mining jobs are, and demonstrate that we have the cleanest water in the world.
Thank you. Ben?
I think the most divisive issue is choice, a woman's right to choose and make decisions about her own body. I think that's really what's at stake in this election, and I think it's going to be tough to bridge that gap because it is such a polarizing issue. I'm a pro-choice candidate. I believe that women should make women's reproductive healthcare decisions. I want to keep the government out of your doctor's office. That's the difference between myself and my opponent.
Thank you. Kim?
So you said divisive issues?
Yes.
Okay, so the divisive issues that I believe are preventing us from moving forward, there's a few of them. Political parties is the first one. I think choice and women's rights, and I think the separation of church and state and the freedom for people to align and marry who they want and be who they are. I think mining is another divisive issue. And so I think that political parties are distracting us and dividing us, when for all practical purposes, I think our viewpoints are far more similar, and there's more of us in the middle than on the left and the right. I think women's rights, who better to stand up for a woman than a woman? I am absolutely pro-choice. What works for me may not work for the other woman, and it goes beyond healthcare rights. It's standing up for women when it comes to good-paying jobs, equal pay for equal worth, promotional opportunities. and again, mining. So I think those are the most divisive issues that we have facing us.
Thank you. Rob, 30 seconds for
Well, the one that
rebuttal.
I haven't commented on, that everybody's on pins and needles waiting for, is I am pro-life, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Of course, I think that there should be some exceptions, for instance, to save the life of the mother. It's interesting that my opponent keeps calling me extreme, like somehow he got a memo and has to use the word extreme at least 3 times in each of these events. According to a KR11 Star Tribune poll, 71% of the people in Minnesota believe there should be at least some limits on abortion. The majority of those people think that it should be somewhere around the first trimester. So I'm so extreme that I'm with the 71% of Minnesotans that believe there should be some limits on abortion. That's how extreme I am. My opponent has articulated no opposition to abortion, including if a baby is 40 weeks at development. To me, that's extreme.
Ben, 30 seconds to respond.
When we start to limit people's freedoms and people's freedoms erode, the question is what's next? First, it's a woman's right to choose. Then maybe it's a woman's right to vote. Then maybe it's a woman's right to marry who they love. I think this is an important topic to discuss and a critical issue in this election.
Thank you. Kim, 30 seconds.
Again, I think Roe versus Wade has been working for us, has worked for us for a multitude of decades. And of course, we have to be reasonable, rational people. We have to communicate, and we have to rely on the experts. We have to bring people to the table to come together to find that common ground. Nobody wants to do anything that's hurtful. Maybe it comes to education. Maybe we need to educate young people. So if they get into a situation, they have other options, and we provide the other mechanisms in place for them for adoption or for the services that they would need to raise those children.
Thank you. Ben, you get this next question first. Our nation needs extensive mineral resources to implement the green economy and clean energy technology. Northern Minnesota can provide these valuable minerals. What should be the path forward in the legislature to encourage responsible mining to meet these needs?
Yeah, so certainly we have the means to provide the minerals for the green economy, and it should come from northern Minnesota. It's a tremendous opportunity for this region to expand mining, create good paying union jobs, and our communities, along with our school districts, would certainly benefit from precious metals mining. Like I said before, we've been mining for 135 years. Nobody does it better or safer. We have the best regulations and the greatest workforce in the world.
Thank you. Kim, same question. Our nation needs extensive mineral resources to implement the green economy and clean energy technology. Northern Minnesota can provide these valuable minerals. What should be the path forward in the legislature to encourage responsible mining to meet these needs?
Again, and I agree with Ben, we have child labor regulations, we have environmental regulations. If they don't get the minerals here, they're gonna get them someplace else and in a way that's not as safe. I think it takes, again, communication and education of our counterparts down in St. Paul. They need to understand the process, and I think that they would be on board. I think we have to look at the permitting processes. I think we have to look at the composition of regulatory boards. We have to look at tax incentives. We have to look at frivolous litigation. And there has to be some kinds of controls and repercussions in place, so there just can't be frivolous lawsuits that will stall this on into the future. We need these resources, and so there's nobody that wants clean water and a clean environment than those of us who live here. We want to enjoy the outdoors. We do enjoy the outdoors, but we need to start off by communicating in an honest way, in a way that there's integrity, and we have to bring people up here. We have to educate them. We have to show them. Again, like Rob said, going to PolyMet, going to Twin Metals, it is amazing. And I encourage anybody to go there. They're responsible companies, and they are committed to a safe environment.
Thank you. Rob, same question. Our nation needs extensive mineral resources to implement the green economy and clean energy technology. Northern Minnesota can provide these valuable minerals. What should be the path forward in the legislature to encourage responsible mining to meet these needs?
So I recently toured both PolyMet and Twin Metals and working on setting up tours for other facilities. And a couple of the big things that they said they need, they need regulatory stability. They need to know what the timeline is when they request a permit. And right now, they don't know what the timeline is. You know, they might expect that it's going to be 2 years and it gets dragged on to be 10 years. So a couple of the things that the legislature could do is put time limits on the permitting process. And if a permit is denied, then, you know, maybe call that agency into a committee meeting and have them explain why that permit was denied, which is one of the bills that Representative Igo has proposed in the past. Kim mentioned frivolous lawsuits. That's another thing. I mean, PolyMet had all of their permits. They were ready to start building, and then the lawsuits got, I think, 4 of the permits pulled. And so, and you know, some of these lawsuits are clearly frivolous. And so we need, and the frivolous lawsuits would help, you know, if we could put a stop to that in other areas, it would help in multiple areas across the state. But agencies need to be held to account when they're not answering. You know, as I said earlier, Mintech has been waiting for an air permit for 15 years, and that's absolutely absurd. They need to be held to account when they're not doing their job on time.
Thank you. Ben, 30 seconds for additions?
So I would work on legislation that streamlines the permitting process. That's clearly what has to happen, and PolyMet's a great example. If the process takes over 20 years, it's no longer a process, and that's just unacceptable.
Thank you. Kim?
And I agree that we need time limits on permitting, and we need to hold our agencies accountable. And I have the skills and experience. For 18 years, I held a state agency accountable, and I know how to bring people to the table. So I have the skills, the experience, and the knowledge in terms of how to hold state agencies accountable. And clearly, by being here today, when I'm passionate about something, I actually walk the talk. I will hold agencies accountable.
Rob, 30 seconds for any additions?
Nope, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Next question to you first, Kim. When it came to passing needed legislation, the state legislature performed poorly in its last session. How can you more effectively work with fellow legislators and the governor to make legislative progress?
I think we have to look at the process in order to make legislative progress. We have to understand what's in the legislation. We have to understand what's in the bills. We have to be transparent and open and not wait until the last hour and try to slip all this legislation through that nobody's had an opportunity to even evaluate. So I think it's important just to have those relationships, to be able to walk down the hall, have conversations, open and honest conversations, even when they're difficult conversations. Again, I firmly believe that the vast majority of the people want what's best for the people. But it's getting to that point and having those difficult conversations and finding that common ground.
Thank you. Rob, same question. When it comes to passing needed legislation, the state legislature performed poorly in its last session. How can you more effectively work with fellow legislators and the governor to make legislative progress?
You know, I think you said they performed poorly the last session. It's not the last session. They've performed poorly for a number of sessions. And I would say the problem is that our legislators, our elected representatives, our elected senators are not given the opportunity to vigorously debate these bills. We have the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader that huddle together and they negotiate these deals, and then they bring the deals back to their members and they expect a certain number of them to vote for these deals. And there really has been no back and forth, no discussion. I think we really need to get these bills back in front of the people's elected representatives and senators so that we can discuss them out in the open. And I think that's probably the first step in moving in the right direction to not having this dysfunctional form of legislature that we've had the last number of years.
Ben, same question. When it came to passing needed legislation, the state legislature performed poorly in its last session. How can you more effectively work with fellow legislators and the governor to make legislative progress?
Yeah, I felt the value of getting things done at a local level. bring that experience to the table. I was on a project team that helped pass a referendum to replace the oldest school in the state. Just happened to be in my home district of Nashwauk-Keewatin. I worked with our local elected officials to organize support for the project. I used my relationships with US Steel to get a 40-acre land donation so that the school could be built. And finally, I used my relationships with our range delegation and members of the IRRB to get the needed funding. I had that experience building coalitions, and I would use my ability to build relationships with legislators on both sides of the aisle to get things done. I've also had the opportunity to build relationships in the governor's office and other state agencies. I feel like I have the experience to hit the ground running on day one as the next state senator from District 7.
Okay, thank you. Kim, 30 seconds for any additions?
Yeah, I think we need to, certainly, we have not seen a state that's gotten the job done, and we're talking about holding agencies accountable. As a legislator, we need to hold ourselves accountable. If we can't get the job done, there should be repercussions. And maybe we should think about term limits for our elected officials. People get too comfortable and they get too complacent. The other thing is, I too have worked in a nonpartisan fashion where we've gotten the job done, and we can't get the job done on the backs of the taxpayers. We have to do it fiscally responsibly.
Rob, 30 seconds for additions?
Yeah, so I've been a union member for almost 25 years. Most of my time in the union has been in Education Minnesota, which, as you probably know, isn't the most favorable for Republicans. And I would spend time in the teacher's lounge over at Hibbing High School where my office was, and we would get into some vigorous, and that's putting it kindly, some vigorous discussions in the teacher's lounge. And we would talk politics and whatever else, but at the end of the day, we'd slap each other on the back and we'd go back to work, and we didn't take it personally. And some of those folks who think they're Democrats, I don't really think they are, but some of those folks are some of my best friends that were able to debate things vigorously and then shake hands and move on.
Thank you. Ben, 30 seconds for additions?
I'd just like to add that the power of organized support has been something that I have found very valuable when it comes to helping move the process along and making progress. That's something that I would lean on heavily as well in this role.
Okay, thank you. Rob, you get the next question first. Minnesota politics has become a minefield. How would you promote civility in the legislature?
I think I just gave the answer. I think that we need to be able to have vigorous debates, that we should debate bills one at a time, rather than having these huge bills where they lump everything together. For instance, we've all been talking about the tax on Social Security. We all want to get rid of, I don't remember if Kim said she did, but I think she does. We all want to get rid of the tax on Social Security. It didn't get done because they were trying to lump it onto, a bigger bill. Why not just debate that one tax bill and vote yes or no, then move on to the next one and the next one? I think we have to quit lumping all of this garbage together and take each and every one on their merits. And again, stop taking things so personally, shake hands at the end of the day. It's kind of like, this is juvenile, but I'm, whatever. There's this old Looney Tunes cartoon where the Wile E. Coyote is chasing after the Roadrunner, right? And so they're running around chasing after each other. And then at the end of the day, they walk out and they punch out with their time card and they walk out the gate and they're like, hey, you ready to go for drinks, Bob? Yep, let's go. That's what politics needs to be. When it's time to debate, let's debate and chase each other around. But when it's time to punch out, shake hands and be friends.
So you're saying if they drank more, they'd be friends? Just checking, Rob.
Something like that.
Ben, Minnesota politics has become a minefield. How would you promote civility in the legislature?
Well, I agree. I think parties have become very extreme on both sides. And that leads to just nothing getting done. I'm reminded by a story that Rick Nolan told me one time. He said there is a list of legislators, Congress folks that it shows the list shows their effectiveness, and those you see on TV every day are on each ends of the list. They're the most extreme, but their effectiveness is low. It's the ones in the middle that you never see on TV or in the newspaper that get the most done. And I think that comes from the ability to work together and do the work of the people. We got to get back to a place where we're able to negotiate, to give a little. I heard once that saying that a good compromise is where both sides feel like they lost a little bit. If you can lose a little bit and keep moving forward and getting done, that progress is much more beneficial to the people we serve than getting absolutely nothing done.
Thank you. Kim, Minnesota politics has become a minefield. How would you promote civility in the legislature?
Well, I have to say, civility in politics, what I've learned over the last 4 months, it's really hard to use those two words in the same sentence. And until you've run for a public office of this level and this magnitude, it's hard to imagine. I can't imagine parties that are trying to win elections, yet preventing people from talking to other people. We are all human beings, and we need to celebrate our differences, and we will end up in a better place. You know, there are givers and there are takers, and I hope that everybody here wants to give and wants to leave our state and our district in a better place than they found it. And you really have to know who you are, and you really have to have some self-actualization and why you're here. Because if you're here because it's the state senate, that's the wrong reason to be here. You have to be here because you want to make the Northland the best it can be. And you have to work across party lines. And like Rob said, at the end of the day, you celebrate your differences, you respect your differences, you shake hands, and you move on.
Rob, 30 seconds for additions.
I think my Looney Tunes analogy hit rock bottom, so I probably better not try and go anywhere from there.
Okay. Ben, 30 seconds for additions.
Nothing to add, Steve.
Kim?
No, other than, you know, I'm gonna just say again, two well-respected senators who knew how to get the job done and worked for the people of the Northland left their party. They were longtime party representatives. They understood what it meant to have to get the job done. And that's why I'm running, because I believe I have the skills and I can represent the views of the Northland, taking the best from both parties and leaving the extremes aside.
The last question, well, other than your closing statements. You thought I'd forget, didn't you? Kim, you get this one first. What should the state senate do to better meet the needs of primary, secondary, and higher education?
Oh, there's so many needs. First of all, we need to look at making permanent the things that we've been able to do with stimulus funding in our schools. And I'm honored to be on a school board and understand that, but definitely the mental health, the social emotional needs of our students. We have to find funding. We have to look at the funding formula. Just increasing the formula for inflation is not enough. The wealthy districts are going to get wealthier, and the districts that are suffering from small and declining enrollment are going to continue to suffer. We have to be able to implement new curriculum. We have to maintain and sustain our mental health, emotional needs of our students. We have to partner in higher education. We can't duplicate our efforts. We have to work collaboratively. And again, we need accountability measures. And we need to make sure that the needs of our students in all levels, and we have to invest, as I'm proud to say, we have invested in a 32,000 square foot early learning center in Hibbing. We have to invest in our earliest learners so they have a solid foundation to move through their life.
Rob, same question. What should the state senate do to better meet the needs of primary, secondary, and higher education?
Well, as I said earlier, our kids' mental health is really in trouble right now, and a lot of that has been exacerbated by the by the lockdowns and, schooling at home. And I have a master's degree in emotional behavior disorders. And so for much of my career, it's been working with kids with emotional problems. And I just see that it's getting, much more difficult. I know in the Hibbing School District last school year, they hired a mental health professional to come into the school and provide therapy during the day. And within like 2 weeks, she was full, so they had to hire somebody else. They hired new intervention specialists because so many kids came in not ready academically. And so that's why I said we're gonna have to spend some of the surplus to try and increase funding for things like that. But the thing that I really have been beating the drum on educationally is the problem that we have for the last 45, 50 years, been trying to prepare every single kid in our high schools to go to a four-year college and university. And we need to reform the grad standards to give flexibility to schools. I mean, in Hibbing, we have some of the best programs around. We have the construction trades class where kids go out and they build Habitat for Humanity homes and they learn those skills right on the job. We have the career academies where we have kids that are, as part of their work day or their school day, are going to work. And so we need to give schools flexibility. I really wish that I had a couple more minutes because I think this is so important that we need to prepare kids for what they're actually going to do after high school. And I'll use my 30 seconds to add to that.
Thank you, Rob. Ben, same question. What should the state senate do to better meet the needs of primary, secondary, and higher education?
Well, a zip code shouldn't determine the quality of the education you receive, and I want to make sure our students come first. The budget surplus, which is our money, is a once-in-a-generation chance to recruit and retain top-tier teachers, support special education programs, reduce classroom sizes, expand career and technical training. There's a lot of good work that's going on in the academies model and expanding our industrial arts programs. And we also need to provide mental health counselors. We can do it all without raising property taxes. I'm proud to have the support of the teachers and want to work with them to craft legislation that addresses the real issues in education, and I want to make sure that we get our fair share of state funding.
Thank you. Kim, additions?
Yes, I'm proud to be a part of the school board that's been able to do all the good things that Rob was describing in our Hibbing schools, and we maintain our buildings. I believe one of the candidates talks about the oldest building or replacing the oldest building in Minnesota schools, but I think our Hibbing High School is about the same age, and I am proud that we maintain that. But the one thing that differentiates me from the two candidates, I stand for school safety. I am all for hunting, for guns, but both of these opponents stand for items that clearly conflict with what the literature has showed us that can contribute to mass incidents in our schools, and we can't have that.
Rob, 30 seconds for additions?
So the part of what I wanted to say then, questions that didn't come up would be like worker shortage. We're seeing huge shortages in elder care facilities, in group homes. And another program in Hibbing, I think they still have it this year, is a CNA program where kids can walk out of Hibbing High School with a CNA degree and they can go get a job. And if we allowed schools flexibility to have more programs like that, maybe we wouldn't have labor shortages in these areas because they would, walk out of school with a CNA, and we could even, extend that to something like welding. Why not walk out of high school with a welding degree and go get a good job at the mines? So I think that we have a lot of potential educationally.
Thank you. Ben?
I think we've got a lot of good work that's going on. I think the Advanced Learning Institute is doing a great job. There's certainly a lot more work to be done, and we need legislators down at the state capitol that are going to help us advance education and make sure that the students here are receiving a world-class education.
Thank you. And now it's time for closing statements. Kim, you get to go first for your 3 minutes, then Rob, then Ben.
Sure. I am actually the only candidate who's truly going to represent the people of this district, who has no agenda, has no alliance or allegiance to any party or any lobbyist. I have the skills and the experience to not only effectively manage and invest the $9.25 billion or $12 billion state surplus, whatever it is today, and the state budget. I know how to hold government accountable. My only interest is with the people of the Northland. I will be accountable to them. I will fight for the great things that make our area as great as it is. I will fight for great union jobs. I will support small businesses, local businesses, which, by the way, I did with all my campaign materials and literature. Can't say either of the opponents did. I want to make sure our kids have the best education possible across the Northland. When we all treat people with respect, we can make decisions and trust that people can make decisions for their own lives, and that includes their healthcare rights and the rights of women. We'll move forward. When we don't let political parties make us think we're more different than we are alike. They're always pointing fingers at each other. They're saying it's the other side, and they're politicizing matters that shouldn't be politicized. It's going to keep our state stuck if we continue to let that happen. That's why we have $9.25 billion stuck in St. Paul. And people will say, how will a write-in candidate ever win? If we want to change the direction we're moving, we can do that. My opponent in the primary election had 41 more votes than I did, with every endorsement you could imagine, including the party endorsement. That's clearly demonstrating parties are not working for the people of the Northland. I am not an endorsed candidate, and I am proud of that. And I will admit, when I filed, I contemplated running as an independent, but I was optimistic that the DFL party wasn't what it was. I didn't realize until I ran myself how much these parties prioritize parties above people. It's deep and it's dark, and we need to change that. And if you want to just fill in the circle and do what's easy, vote for one of the candidates. We'll stagnate. So I challenge you to be bold and write in Kim McLaughlin for state senate. When you see Rob and you see Ben's name, cross those out and write in Kim, and I can guarantee you that we will move forward in the Northland.
Rob, 3 minutes for close.
Okay, well, again, I would like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank the chamber again for hosting this. Mr. Potts, Pastor Dan, you guys are always every year or every 2 years volunteering to do this. And a special shout out, Hibbing Public Access and Ron Werkla, who's in the back. I recently learned that he's been doing this volunteer year in and year out. So wanted to acknowledge him back there. My wife Jamie and I grew up right here on the range. We were both raised in the homes of miners. My dad worked at Minorca for 33 years, and Jamie's dad, Bob, worked at Keetac for 34 years. We've experienced the ups and downs of mining. In the 1980s, both of our dads experienced prolonged layoffs. Those were tough times. A lot of families, thousands of families were forced to move out of the area. It seems like every third person I talk to down in the Twin Cities is either from here or one of their parents is from here. That's how many people we lost. And I'm so glad that my parents and Jamie's parents stuck it out so that we could grow up here. So when these Metro activists stand against mining, I tend to take that personally. The thing is, and maybe they don't realize it, but mining is the absolute backbone of almost everything that we have up here, whether it's entire cities that were built by the mines like Hoyt Lakes or Babbitt, or the schools like the one right down the street. It was all paid for through mining. And it's not just the things paid for directly by mining. We're also talking about hospitals and grocery stores and clinics and car dealerships that are supported through the paychecks of our miners. We're talking about infrastructure that was paid for with IRRB dollars. Many of the roads that these activists used to get up to their campsites in the Boundary Waters were paid for by, you guessed it, the mines. So as we've talked about these issues tonight, we have to remember that full support of our mines and miners needs to be at the absolute top of that list. As you've listened to our discussion tonight, I'd like you to think about who you trust to support our mines and our miners. For the last 20 or 30 years, we've trusted 2 men in the Senate that have been fierce fighters for the Iron Range. But remember, they left the DFL because they caucused with Republicans because they realized that the DFL no longer cares about the Iron Range. They no longer care about the Northland. You've heard a lot of the same answers. We've agreed on awful lot of things tonight. We're all gonna support, mining. We all support LGA. We all want fully funded schools. We all want better roads. But without mining, there won't be a whole lot left for any of those things. And if the DFL has their way, there won't be any mining up here. So I'm asking for your support and your trust on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben, 3 minutes for close?
Well, thanks, Steve, and thanks to Pastor Dan, Shelley, and everyone at the chamber, and of course, Ron. Thanks for your time and energy tonight. It's been my pleasure to be here to talk about these important issues that I'm very passionate about. When lawmakers choose politics over people, we suffer. I'm not interested in extreme politics that lead to gridlock we're experiencing. And elections have consequences. What's at stake in this election is the freedom to choose what private healthcare decisions people make. I believe women's reproductive healthcare decisions should be made by women. I want to keep the government out of your doctor's office. My opponent wants to make those decisions for you. My whole career has been based on serving my community. I've been effective in local government, and I know I can be effective at the state level. I know the value of getting things done, and now more than ever, we need people in St. Paul that can get the work done for us here at home. Access to high-quality healthcare, safe nursing, and assisted living homes, and not having to worry about increased costs of living are the foundations to grow our communities. I will sponsor legislation to eliminate Social Security taxes, raise the taconite homestead credit, and set payment limits on our prescription drugs. As a first responder, I see the courageous work law enforcement does every day. I'll make sure our departments have enough funding to fight gun crime and never have to choose between the best training or equipment. I want to use my experience to make sure that the Iron Range continues to be the best place to live, work, raise a family, and retire comfortably. I need your support to be able to do this and do that work. I'm asking for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
One of the proudest things as a teacher is to see a colleague and 2 former students. Great job, guys.
Thank you to HPAT for covering this. Ron Workla always does a miraculous job. This will be streamed on Facebook. It will be live. Thanks to Shelley, who is a master at details and keeps us on time. Thank you for the audience, those of you who are here, those of you who are watching. And I thank my colleague, Pastor Dan. We've been doing this for a few years now, and so far we haven't screwed up too badly. So thank you all for being here. Thanks to the 3 candidates. We appreciate you sharing your views with the public, and we wish you all good luck on Tuesday, November 8th. Unfortunately, we can't elect all 3 of you, but one of you will walk away with the prize, I guess, if it is a prize. Thank you, and good evening.
Thanks.